Good morning, students. In the third part of the essay titled Author as Producer, he discusses this idea of consciousness and production. The materialist aesthetics of Brecht and Benjamin imply a severe criticism of the idealist case that the work's formal integration recovers a lost harmony or prefigures a future one. We have these ideas given by Hegel. He talks about this role of art, that the role of art is to evoke and realize all the power of man's soul, to stir him into a sense of something like creative plenitude. But for Marx, capitalist society with its predominance of quantity over quality, where there is this conversion of all social products into market commodities happens, it is essentially inimical to art. It is something which is harmful to art. Capitalist society, according to Marx, with all those Philistine soullessness, with all those materialist soullessness, is inimical to art. For Marx, the ability of art to manifest human powers is actually dependent on the objective movement of history itself. And we should also understand this art is a product of the division of labor. Even culture is itself a kind of surplus value. This is what Trotsky points out, that it feeds on the sap of economics. Art actually needs comfort and even abundance. This is what he says in Literature and Revolution. Art needs comfort and even abundance. And what happens in capitalist society is that art is converted into a commodity, partially reached beyond those limits. It can give us a certain kind of truth. And he's not sure whether it is a scientific or theoretical truth, but the truth of how men experience their conditions of life and how they protest against them. Here, Brecht agrees with this neo-Hegelian critics, the idea that art should reveal men's powers and possibilities. But here, he also insists that these possibilities should be all those concrete historical ones rather than something like abstract universal wholeness, universal human wholeness. Something which is rooted in the historical situation. He would also want to insist on the productive basis, which determines how far this is possible, and in that point he agrees with Marx and Engels. And there is this criticism against Brecht and Benjamin. Terry Eagleton says that there is an obvious danger inherent in a concern with art's technological basis. This is actually the trap of technologism, the belief that technical forces in themselves, rather than the place they occupy within a whole mode of production, are the determining factor in history. The belief that technical forces in themselves are the determining factor in history. Sometimes Brecht and Benjamin falls into this trap. Their work doesn't answer this question, like how an analysis of art as a mode of production should be combined with an analysis of it as a mode of experience. And in other words, what is the relationship between base and superstructure in art itself? And their close friend Theodore Adorno criticizes Benjamin for the same reason, resorting to a simple model to define this relationship, for seeking out all those analogies or resemblance between isolated economic facts and isolated literary facts. He says that, Theodore Adorno says that Benjamin is actually resorting to too simple a model. And he's trying to present in such a way that the relationship between base and superstructure looks more metaphorical, more symbolic. And here he says that Benjamin's way of thinking here is something like an idiosyncratic way of thinking, which is completely opposite to the systematic methods you see in Lukács and Goldman. Here we come to the views of Terry Eagleton. He says one of the most important questions which Marxist literary criticism has now to confront is to describe this relationship within art, between art as production and art as ideological. And here he says that Marxist criticism should learn something from other arts as well. There is this particular example given there about John Burgess' comments on oil painting in his famous work Ways of Seeing. He makes a remarkable comment on oil painting which flourished during this period, during this capitalist period. He says, oil painting developed as an artistic genre when it was needed to express a certain ideological way of seeing, a way of seeing for which other techniques were inadequate. Oil painting flourished when other techniques were inadequate to express that certain age. And what you see in oil painting is something like a certain density, a certain luster and solidity is what you see in oil painting. And according to John Berger, it does to the world what capital does to social relations, reducing everything to the equality of objects. Everything is seen as objects. Even the painting itself becomes an object, a commodity to be bought and possessed. It becomes a piece of property and represents the world in those terms. There is this stage of economic production of the society in which oil painting first grew up as a particular technique of artistic production, and then there is this set of social relations happening between artist and audience. In the case of oil painting, there is this producer, consumer, or vendor, purchaser. There will be a person who commissions an artist to paint his portrait, and there arises a set of social relations. There is this relation between artistic property relations and property relations in general. There is this question of how the ideology which underpins those property relations embodies itself in a certain form of painting, a certain way of seeing and depicting objects. And here, Eagleton comes to the conclusion that it is this kind of argument which connects the modes of production to a facial expression captured on canvas. The facial expression captured on canvas has certain lust, as I said. It has some kind of a solidity which actually reveals the set of relations. So, according to Eagleton, it is this kind of argument which Marxist literary criticism must develop in its own terms. And he comes to the last part. He says, there are two reasons why Marxist criticism must do so. And unless we can relate past literature, however indirectly, to the struggle of men and women against exploitation, we shall not fully understand our own present and so will be less able to change it effectively. So, as I said earlier, Marxism is all about making change in the world. To see other philosophies, more than understanding the world, they seek to change the world. Unless we don't make an attempt to understand the past literature, if we don't make this attempt to understand the struggle of men and women against exploitation through this past literature, we will not be able to understand our own present, and thereby we will fail to make the change because we shall be less able to read text or to produce those art forms which might make for a better art and a better society. So, Marxist criticism is not just an alternative technique for interpreting text. This is how he ends this essay. He says Marxist criticism is not just an alternative technique for interpreting all those great texts, great canons like Paradise Lost or Middlemarch. It is actually part of our liberation from oppression. The primary task of the Marxist critique is to actively participate in and help direct the cultural emancipation of the masses. So this is how he ends this text. So we come to the end of the discussion on the essay, the author as producer. Hope it is clear. Thank you. Have a nice day.